Good afternoon. I'm Alex Mozed, founder and CEO of Applico, co-author of Modern Monopolies, and we are on Winner Take All, where we talk about all things tech, antitrust regulation, monopolies, and much, much more. I'm also joined by Nick Johnson, co-author of Modern Monopolies as well. And so let's jump right in. Facebook has been testifying in front of, I think the Senate, maybe Finance Committee or one of the Senate committees talking about Libra, their planned cryptocurrency, which they are planning to launch next year. They're planning to have the Libra organization based out of Switzerland, but they said, it'll still have to comply with all of the U.S. regulation and the different U.S. financial.
Libra will be regulated by Switzerland, and then Calibra, which is their wallet and all the stuff they're going to do to actually facilitate payments, will have to be regulated by the U.S. domestically.
Yes. And I'd say probably their biggest argument, probably strongest argument is this. Basically, it's saying, hey, this is inevitable. If we don't do this, someone else is going to do this.
The Chinese central bank is looking at doing it.
Yeah, or let's say what happens if an Alibaba with an Alipay or an Alipay, a Chinese tech platform monopoly does it. And basically, who would you rather have, a US platform or a Chinese platform? I mean, they didn't say it that explicitly, but that's basically what they were getting at. And I would agree with them. I mean, I think it is inevitable that you're going to have a large tech platform monopoly eventually do its own crypto. And the interesting thing, what they've done is they've raised maybe almost $1 billion. They plan on actually having a Libra reserve where they say that it'll be a 1-to-1 match. I don't really know if they'll be able to scale it to have a 1-to-1 match, but at least they'll have a reserve.
It's called what they call a stable coin, the idea being that the value of it is pegged to currencies that they hold in reserve. And that's what that $1 billion that they've raised, essentially for people buying seats to be on the original Libra consortium that will put together the charter and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. That's where a lot of that money is going to go. Mm-hmm. It's going to be a basket of currencies and not just US dollars, but diversify that a little bit.
Yeah. And so I don't know why the senators didn't ask about that. I mean, right? If I'm kind of concerned about this, what I would want to hear is that they're going to peg this to the US dollar, not to some kind of mishmash of all these different, say, currencies or different, market instruments. That's not what I would want if I was a US senator. But I didn't hear any of them ask about that.
Well, I think the big concern is what happens if you have a private entity that effectively controls monetary policy and money creation. Now, you do have some of that already today. Banks lending already partake in some of that activity, and the Federal Reserve has some control over that, setting the federal funds rate, and things like QE that they've been doing help determine the amount of money flowing into the economy. But a lot of that money creation is already private. But banks, of course, are regulated entities specifically for that purpose. Facebook is not. So that's a lot of where that concern comes from government types.
Yeah, Facebook's not regulated. I mean, this will obviously need to be regulated and will need to comply with the U.S. regulation, as you're saying, with Calibra and, the wallet. PayPal is one of the founding, funders and sponsors of Libra. I don't understand. I mean, to me, this is competitive to PayPal. To me, PayPal is kind of like a digital bank. They are lending. They are doing a lot of things in this arena. To me, this is something that kind of like, why wasn't PayPal doing this? This seemed like them kind of asleep at the wheel here.
I think that you can definitely make the case that this is something that they should have been doing. But I think if I'm PayPal, if I'm doing this today, I have to be involved. The same reason that Amex and Visa and some of these other guys are involved. And the same way that they have a relationship, PayPal does with Amex, Visa, and all the MasterCard and all the big credit card companies. They're kind of what I would call frenemies, which is you need to have a relationship with them for the wallet to work. But the way PayPal kind of makes money vis-a-vis the credit card guys is trying to basically facilitate as much payment outside of credit cards, so getting people to add funds directly into PayPal, because then they have to pay transaction fees if it goes to the credit card. So I imagine it's a similar dynamic.
I think a MasterCard, a Visa, who are both a part of this, who are both in Plaid. So is PayPal, so is Booking.com, so is Farfetch. I mean, if you just look at the number of platform companies, eBay, obviously Facebook, that are joining this initiative, it's a huge amount of platform companies that kind of see the power in this. And but I think PayPal, especially, much more so than a Visa or a MasterCard, because Visa and MasterCard aren't actually doing the lending. The lending is coming from, actually their banking partners. So, but PayPal does lending. I mean, I think they've been trying to actually spin some of that down because it's not asset light and it's been hurting maybe some of their multiples. But still, this seemed like PayPal kind of asleep at the wheel. They have to do it. It's obligatory now because they've missed this, in my opinion. But I would definitely give PayPal a knock for not having tried to lead this on their own. Other things. So Facebook was saying that they're doing this to enable more transactions to help the 90 million small businesses on Facebook to increase their commerce. The senators were really grilling him on data and how are you going to use this data. And so what Facebook was saying was, we're not going to use the data and the transaction data for ad purposes unless a consumer gives consent. And no one followed up on this. It's like, okay, I'm going to click the million-page obligatory legalese checkbox, and in that checkbox, I'm going to give consent. To me,
it's the what you have with a lot of the GDPR, which is now everyone just has a little pop-up on their page that says, you accept cookies from our website. I'm sure they'll find a clever way around it like that, so that most people just don't even read it and click it by default.
Yeah, I mean, why aren't these senators able to go a level deeper and say, okay, you're probably going to maybe not force them, but close to force them to give you consent, and then what happens? And so they just kind of, it's kind of watching, adults play with little children because they can just talk circles around these guys. It's kind of pathetic. You're going to need to create a separate account. You're going to need to use a government-issued ID. They're going to need to comply with anti-money laundering requirements. Also, they're asking them, so is this going to be open? Can WhatsApp and Facebook apps let you use other competitor wallets? And the guy is like, yeah, of course we're going to let you use other competitor wallets. That's kind of the whole point. What they are missing is that Facebook controls the currency, Libra. And so, of course, you're going to let other wallets interact with the system. The key is, would WhatsApp let you use other cryptocurrencies? And I guarantee you the answer to that is no.
Right. Well, they don't necessarily. So the currency itself is going to be controlled by this consortium. Facebook has just one vote on that. The other members have essentially relatively, I think, equal vote. So in terms of controlling the currency, they don't. But the main venues in which the currency is going to be used, certainly initially, absolutely. And things like WhatsApp, where they've talked about that being kind of the initial use case, potentially in somewhere like India, where there's remittances or something like that as kind of a core use case. Mm-hmm. They'll definitely have a lot of control and influence in how it gets used. Mm-hmm. And they're obviously going to have one of the biggest wallets just by their sheer scale of what they can bring.
Yep. Who is this bad for? Number one, this is bad for banks that have any kind of, I don't think any bank has a material amount of their business in the money transfer sector. That's kind of been on the decline already with many startups getting into this space. But I think any startup directly in the money transfer space, like Remitly, I think just raised a big round maybe a couple weeks ago. This is a direct competitor to the money transfer business, international money transfer business. Very, very bad for any banks that have that on their P&L, and certainly any startups that are in this space. No bueno for those folks. Anyone else a loser here?
I think some of the competing payment platforms, so PayPal, I think, which you identified. There are a number of other, smaller ones, not necessarily in the U.S., but in emerging markets, where I think might get some traction with Facebook having WhatsApp be a very big presence there. Right. Then are suddenly going to have a new big competitor coming in, much like Alibaba had Alipay for a while, which was kind of the dominant one in China, and then all of a sudden WeChat said, "Hey, we're going to go do that too." Yeah. And then now you have WePay, and they're basically neck and neck. So I think in some of these markets where you might have one or two big kind of dominant payment platforms, something like we talked about
crypto coming in, could disrupt
or Paytm in India. Maybe Facebook has a big presence there because they do win their main apps in WhatsApp today.
Yeah. So switching gears here, we talked about Amazon yesterday with Prime Day. Prime Day is still going today. But there's a lot of research here ranking the top e-commerce players in the US. And so yesterday we were talking about the role of GMV, the GMV not being factored in properly.
Right.
into just, investors' analysis, Bloomberg's analysis of these marketplace platform stocks. Let's go deeper on this. eMarketer has this research published in February of this year, and it says, hey, Amazon in 2018 has $234 billion in retail e-commerce sales. eBay has $35 billion in retail e-commerce sales. And then they go down the list. Here is the problem. The numbers are wrong. I don't know why this stuff is so hard to capture.
It's also not apples to apples, which is the main problem, right?
Because they're looking at revenue and not looking at GMV.
Right. Some of the numbers are meant to be GMV, which essentially is what they call gross sales. Some of the other numbers that they're looking at are actually revenue numbers. What was the one that was way off?
eBay, they reported at 35.6. Thanks for the accuracy on those 0.63, right? They're bringing this thing out to 2 decimals. But eBay, in their earnings, publicly stated documents, GMV is $89 billion. I think I might have seen a figure at 95 if you're including auto GMV. Whatever it is, right. It's at least 2 to 3x off this number.
That's more like a revenue number than a GMV number. And then I think the other one we saw was Walmart, which the number came out recently. They've got 21 to 22 billion in revenue in the e-commerce division. And here I think it says they have about 21 billion. But that's sales. It doesn't account for GMV marketplace sales that they're going through, as we were talking about yesterday. That number isn't being factored into analysis. And here's an example of that.
Perfect. Perfect example. And then again, the list goes on. What are the other product marketplace stocks in Platt? Well, I can show you. So we have here product marketplaces. Okay. Farfetch right here. No GMV data on Bloomberg. We have eBay and Etsy. eBay they had in their list. Etsy looks about $4 billion in GMV. So what are some other big product in the US product marketplaces that
Farfetch is another one?
Yep, Farfetch out of the UK, but yeah, maybe that's why they didn't include them, but anyway, and look, Amazon doesn't have the GMV number. Bloomberg doesn't have the GMV number for Amazon. Okay. But it's just shocking to me how they get these numbers wrong. And then all the percentages are drastically off. So I don't know what's going on, but someone give eMarketer a call here and let's get this stuff fixed. Okay. Let's talk about Google. Google, I think as we are speaking right now, is testifying also in front of Congress about antitrust stuff.
Right.
Here is the problem. The good thing for Google. One, the DOJ is overseeing the investigation into Google, which means, honestly, Google doesn't have anything to worry about because the DOJ is going to be focused on privacy for the consumer. What the DOJ is not going to look into from an antitrust standpoint is how is Google competing against its content creators, against its producers? Let's look at Yelp, which has had I think 7-year lawsuit against Google now.
Yep.
We have TripAdvisor, the TripAdvisor CEO and the Yelp CEO. Both were supportive of the DOJ investigating Google. The unfortunate thing is that from my kind of little birdies, what I've been told is the DOJ is not going to look at the producer side of the argument. The DOJ is going to solely look at this from a consumer perspective. They're going to solely look at how the consumer has been disadvantaged by privacy being abused by Google.
Right.
And there's nothing's going to stick there because the consumer on Google search, on YouTube, on Android is absolutely a net winner on Google Docs, on Gmail. The list goes on and on and on. All these things are free.
Right. You basically have a barter exchange where you're giving up data for access to the service. And if you look at the value, that's very easy for Google to make this a very technical economics argument of, you get more value than we're taking in the data. Because the other piece of it is that raw data, so my personal data, isn't worth that much. It's what you can do when you combine that with a bunch of other stuff and then put it through data analysis and big data processes that actually make it valuable. If I'm Google, I could easily make the argument that, yeah, your data is worth almost nothing. And that's what we do with it. And that's our IP that makes it valuable.
Right. Now, Google literally has scraped websites like Yelp. Jeremy Stoppelman, CEO of Yelp, has publicly stated this. They are tweaking the Google PageRank algorithm to favor Google's content over their third-party producers' content like Yelp, like TripAdvisor. These aren't small companies. These are public companies, also in Platt. And there are countless stories of YouTube content creators being taken advantage of. And I think the key here is, can you prove that a content creator on YouTube or Google or let's say on Android is a customer? And you can absolutely prove that. All you need to do is follow the money, right? YouTube gets a 45% cut of ad revenue from a content creator. On Android, you pay, I think, 30% to Android, right? If you're an app developer.
Depending on the type of app and it was a subscription or not. There's some differences there, but yes.
Roughly 30% through the Google Play Store. And on Google Search, you could say that there is a mechanism of cost to the producer when they punch you down in the Google PageRank, and now you're forced to buy ads.
They're preferring their own products. They've done this with Google Shopping. They've done this with
and they got
places.
They got in trouble with the EU in 2017 or
flights versus buying stuff from Expedia or some of the other OTAs out there.
Yep. So there's absolutely, I think, plenty of precedent to make the connection that the content creators could be considered a customer for Google. And if they're a customer, does the monopoly raise prices on the customer and put the customer at a disadvantage? And that, ladies and friends, is the past 50 years of antitrust precedent championed by the Chicago School of Economics, which everyone has said, the current antitrust precedent is wrong. No, those people are wrong. The current antitrust precedent is fine if you establish that platforms have two customer groups. If you say that Google's content creators, their producers, are also customers, which you can do, but it's not big and sexy, and it's not in vogue. It's not in the news. It's not in the political kind of foray to say, look at like the 1% of people creating content for Google Search or YouTube or apps for Android, and look at how the dominant platform monopoly in Google is raising prices on them. Okay, let's go after them for antitrust concerns.
Right, and the privacy stuff is, funnily enough, we were talking about yesterday. You were seeing with GDPR. It targeted Google and Facebook, but one, it didn't actually effectively go after them. It helped them. And two, the privacy thing is not just a platform issue. So you're missing a lot of the dynamics of what makes these companies dominant and successful if you're focusing on privacy. That's something that affects every online business, like a Marriott. What was the other one who got?
British Airways.
British Airways, who got hit.
Yesterday.
They all have online businesses. They all have the same privacy issues that Google and Facebook do.
And now let's talk about, so Facebook had the settlement last Friday, I think, for $5 billion.
Yep.
And I think the FTC missed this, right? They settled $5 billion penalty for Cambridge Analytica and the privacy stuff. I mean, all of that was public information. Like, they had APIs. All of this was publicly known. So Facebook got a slap on the wrist. I mean, it's actually it's the biggest penalty ever by $5 billion.
But for Facebook, it's basically nothing, and that's why their stock price shot up right after it happened.
And but here is the real thing that's going to continue, and this is interesting because Zuckerberg 2 months ago came out and said we need to be regulated to figure out what are the boundaries between suppressing free speech,
right,
and filtering hate speech, and just having like a safe environment for people to post content and have dialogue in a content platform. And basically saying, hey, I shouldn't be making this decision, and I'm not going to get it right. And I can guarantee you next year, no matter who wins the election, one side is going to be angry at Facebook. And unless you have the FTC, and this is the role of the FTC, to provide guidance about what is appropriate, what is crossing the line. It's just like if I'm in a movie theater and I yell fire, that's illegal. If there's no fire, you can't do that. You actually get in trouble for that. And that's not a violation of free speech, and that's gone through the courts and that. But where are those lines? And no one has really had that conversation. Where is it now violating free speech and regulating what kind of content you can post and what is just inappropriate content and that's harmful content? And there are lines, and the government needs to step in. But it's weird to me why the FTC is shying away from this, even when Zuckerberg is literally saying, come regulate me. Actually, he literally just said that at the Aspen Ideas Festival in June,
right,
about 3 weeks ago. Literally said it. So I don't get it.
I think if I'm the FTC, it's probably a pretty daunting task, and I might feel, I don't have the expertise or resources to do it. So they're maybe biding their time in hopes that as this becomes a bigger political issue, they might actually get
like the executive branch. I don't know.
A bit of the force behind it that they need to make it happen. But
yeah, it's odd. It's unfortunate, really. Okay. What other stuff? So Marriott. God, this was hilarious. Marriott CEO is saying that he's declaring war on Airbnb. They've got 1.3 million hotel rooms. If you remember, a few years ago, they acquired Starwood Hotels and became by far kind of the largest hotel company in the world now.
Right.
And they have now gone all in on competing with Airbnb for rentals, in a home.
Well, that they say all in, but the number of homes that they had was what, like 2,000?
Yeah.
This goes back to the conversation I think we had last week about kind of fake marketplace initiatives where they say, oh, we're doing a marketplace. We're competing with...
They have 2,000 luxury rental homes.
Right. We're competing with Airbnb. Now, that's whole homes, and Airbnb's does it by listing. So those are not all entire houses. Airbnb has about 6 million listings. So I'm Marriott. If I'm saying I'm going all in on something, I'm off by a couple orders of magnitude from where I need to be. This is not a new challenge for large businesses, as we talked about last week, trying to dabble in this kind of stuff. But it doesn't seem like they're going all in on it if they're that far off.
Well, and here's the thing. It's a winner-take-all market. As we have said, I will bet anyone that Marriott does not become the number 2 rental home platform. And here's why. There's already a number 2, and it's called VRBO. And guess who owns VRBO? I think it's Expedia, right? Yeah. Yeah, Expedia. Expedia owns it. So there is no way that Marriott is going to supplant VRBO as the number 2 to Airbnb. There's Airbnb, there's VRBO, and then there's Marriott all the way down here. And I have absolutely no clue how they are going to even come close to VRBO, replace VRBO as the number 2.
It's definitely a big task. If I'm them, I'm hoping that I can combine that with my existing slate. I think they have 1 million or so rooms, which is significant market share in the hotel space. But this is a somewhat different market, as we've seen with Airbnb. And having 1 million hotel rooms doesn't necessarily mean you're going to crack open that home sharing and rental market.
Now, here's what Marriott should be. Let's be positive, okay? They should go buy Sonder. Sonder is basically like a hotel, but on Airbnb. And Sonder's whole philosophy is that it's linear. It's not a platform, but that we are going to basically either buy entire kind of apartment buildings and then put them on Airbnb. And the cost of customer acquisition is so low on Airbnb that I can build a brand on Airbnb. It's just like if you think about Marriott brands on Expedia, right, on Booking.com, that you now I think Marriott has over 30 brands now. And then they've now let people, investors buy those franchises, and then they actually own the real estate. Now Marriott's an operating company. But so Sonder to me is the 21st century Marriott. And that's really what Marriott should be doing, is saying, I'm going to go buy Sonder or their competitor. I apologize. I can't recall the competitor's name. And we are going to become the dominant brands on Airbnb. And I can, and right now there are no recognizable brands on Airbnb, which is basically just free greenfield for me to go and do that. And all of the people who go on Airbnb now, when they see an apartment listed on Airbnb from Sonder or, Marriott, they will associate a certain level of quality, a certain level of service, a certain kind of feeling with that property. And they'll be much more comfortable to book that branded property on Airbnb than some random person's home. And that's the whole play. I think it makes complete sense, but there's no way that it would be like Marriott saying, we're going to go compete with Expedia and Booking.com. Instead, now they're saying we're going to compete with Airbnb and Expedia. You're just not going to win.
Yeah, they definitely a big uphill fight. And if they're actually going to fight this fight, they need to go much more aggressively to have an impact. I think that if you're not going to win the platform fight, which it doesn't seem like they're really in it to win it, then finding out how you can leverage your position as a brand like Marriott is to get a great partnership out of someone like Airbnb makes sense as a play. But I think the platform opportunity was there. There might be a little bit late to that. And if you're too late to it, then you got to figure out how you work within that ecosystem.
Now, Marriott bought Starwood in 2016. If I think they spent $13 billion buying Starwood. If they had spent $13 billion to compete with Airbnb in 2016, maybe they could have been number 2. But instead, they decided to consolidate. They decided to do the traditional thing that all the big linear players typically do when faced with platform competition, which is consolidate supply, rip out costs, consolidate these things, and just do roll-ups. And instead, now Airbnb was founded in 2008. It's over 10 years, and they're the next one to go public pretty soon. It's too far. And I guarantee you that Marriott public stockholders are not going to have the conviction or the wherewithal to say, let's go dump a ginormous amount of money chasing number 2, which is Expedia, not even Airbnb. So I don't know. It just doesn't make any sense. These are smart guys. I just don't understand why they kind of go down these paths. It's just so late. Anyway, Dominos. Let's talk about another linear enterprise that's completely missed the boat here. Domino's Pizza faces new threat, keyword new, from delivery apps like Uber Eats and Grubhub. I mean, this was published on July 11th, 2019. I don't know, Amelia, but I wouldn't say this is a new threat. Why has Domino's not said to itself, man, I have this asset called local delivery in suburbia almost all across the United States of America? What if I was to open up all of that delivery capability to other restaurants? Maybe they're not even doing pizza,
right? But
maybe they're doing tacos. Maybe they're doing burgers. Maybe they're doing complementary products that aren't competitive to Domino's. But I have all of this installed infrastructure. How could I use that? That's called platform innovation. I don't know why Domino's hasn't done it. So it's not a surprise to me that their stock has tanked 7% today because of the threat from Uber Eats and Grubhub. I mean, come on.
Right. That Grubhub's been around for how long now? And Uber Eats has been around for at least several years at this point.
And how long has Grubhub been public? Yeah.
So this is not a new threat. I think what you're starting to see is the actual impact is being felt now. Once you reach that point, you're pretty much too late to respond to it in an effective way.
Grubhub went public April of 2014. Been over 5 years. And look, it makes sense, right? What were the dominant cities, keyword cities, that all these delivery platforms get their starts? All in metropolitan, very high density. The logistics is much easier.
New York.
You have public transportation. It's just logistically much easier. So it makes sense that it took much longer for the delivery platforms to creep into suburbia. Now the delivery platforms are getting into suburbia. Domino's is getting a hit.
This goes back to the ways of doing platform innovation that we talked about, I think, in episode 1, which is there's the Uber Eats model. Uber didn't do delivery. They launched Uber Eats by taking their existing assets, drivers, and then creating a platform around that to deliver food. Who else had drivers? Domino's. They didn't think about it in a platform manner and think, how can I use this existing asset that I have to launch this additional network? And that's the difference between where Uber Eats is today and where Domino's is today.
Yeah. So look, it's tough to change your business model. It's tough to make these long-term risky investments and have public shareholders come along for it, to tolerate that. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's certainly predictable. So the other thing here is McDonald's adds DoorDash as a new delivery partner. If you remember, McDonald's had exclusively partnered up with Uber Eats.
Yep.
And there's actually been countless articles here that basically McDonald's is the backbone upon which Uber Eats was able to expand globally, internationally. And all the while, it just didn't make any sense, right? Like, why is McDonald's only partnering with one delivery platform? Why aren't they working with multiple? Why isn't McDonald's trying to get some points in Uber Eats? Right? I want equity. If I'm giving you, McDonald's has, I think this was 7,000 7,000 stores. At one point, they accounted for nearly 9% of all restaurants on Uber Eats. This was from February of last year, a year and a half ago.
So when McDonald's did get, to be fair, they got better rates. So they're not paying the same fees and take rates that a mom and pop type restaurant is going to pay on Uber Eats. That's good, but that's a short-term gain. If you're talking about actually owning a piece of the pie, which they could have done certainly if they became basically the tentpole for this entire platform to grow, that's a much better long-term play than just say, I'm going to get a good deal for now.
Give me some points. I mean, you basically helped Uber Eats build a global business, literally on your back. And what did you get for it? You got some price reduction. I mean, you could get price reduction if you still worked with Uber Eats and Delivery Hero and Caviar. I guarantee McDonald's could still get price reductions if they aren't exclusive with Uber Eats. I don't know who is negotiating this stuff, but I'm sorry, but not sorry. Okay. Last thing here, B2B distribution. B2B distribution, the thing I like about B2B distribution is it's early. Amazon Business has only been in there for 3.5, 4 years.
Right.
It's early. It's not Marriott at 10, 11 years. It's not retail at 25 years. It's not, food delivery platforms at probably, 10 plus years, Grubhub Public 5 years ago. It's early. And the large linear incumbents in B2B distribution still have the ability to fight back in a much cheaper way, as opposed to needing to dump billions and billions of dollars to compete and then hopefully try and get second place, which is never fun.
But that's what Microsoft did with Bing, and they spent a lot of money and they've gotten to a solid second place and it's self-sufficient now, but cost them many billions of dollars to get there.
Exactly. So this is why I like B2B. It's actually 2 to 3 times the size of retail in the United States. Retail in the United States is about $2.5 trillion. B2B distribution is estimated at between $6 to $8 trillion. So right. 2 to 3 times the size.
About $1 trillion of that, I think, almost is already done through e-commerce.
Right. Or digital in some way.
Right.
Now, here's our prediction for B2B. It's going to be somewhat similar to what we've seen in retail, which is the rise of specialized marketplaces in e-commerce. What are specialized marketplaces, do you ask? Great question. So product marketplaces, if in retail, we published this over a year ago. We look at clothes, we look at furniture, we look at sneakers with Goat and StockX, we look at art, we look at cars. Those are other product marketplaces that should be in that eMarketer number for sure, that are definitely not in there.
Car Gurus, Cars.com, and those guys. Yep,
definitely not in there. Flowers, jewelry, etc. So Farfetch is in Plaid. Multiple car product marketplaces are in Plaid. And so basically what you're seeing is these specialized marketplaces, right? That you're going to have the overall general winner in Amazon, and I think Walmart as the number 2. And then the question is, in the specific verticals of retail, who is the winner, right? I think there's only one really winner take all in a specialized vertical, because a specialized vertical will also be competing with the general category winners. But I don't think you'll have 2 dominant specialized vertical winners, right? I think it's either, for example, Goat or StockX. And now I think because Goat got $100 million from Foot Locker, I'm probably putting my money on Goat right now. But I think the same thing will play out in B2B distribution. So if we look at a few of the folks in the product marketplace arena that are on here. Oh, also, man, how do we forget this? Redfin, Zillow Group are definitely facilitating e-commerce. I don't know. Maybe it's not retail, like whatever.
Yeah, I think real estate gets a little further from retail.
Sure. Okay, I'll give them that. In the UK, you've got groups like Auto Home. I think they're in the UK, right? Or you've got Car Gurus. So you've got car product marketplaces, you've got real estate product marketplaces that are in Platt. But anyway, going back to this, in B2B distribution, you have over 10 different verticals. Each vertical has over $100 billion in throughput.
Yep.
You have multiple billion-dollar B2B distributors in each vertical. So that's electrical, that's industrial supplies like a Grainger, Fastenal, HD Supply. That's building materials. That's metal. That's food, B2B distribution like Cisco and US Foods. Plastics, HVAC, plumbing, lighting. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Massive verticals for each one of these. If you think about how do I get to $6 to $8 trillion, right? There's a lot of these different verticals. And I think you could have at least one dominant winner-take-all B2B marketplace winner in each one of those verticals. And it's still early enough that you could do a lot of this stuff organically. Now, going back to episode 1, where we were talking about the different ways that you can capture platform innovation, that you can capture platform value. The first way we talked about was having VCs fund your platform startup. Here is the problem. VCs don't want to fund B2B marketplaces, or are certainly much more reticent to fund a B2B marketplace that they know will be competing against Amazon Business. That is a much more difficult investment to make. When you say, oh, so who are your big competitors? Oh, Amazon. Oh, Amazon Business is already doing over $10 billion in GMV, growing at 20% a month. Here's a check. No, it really doesn't work that way. So who is going to go up against Amazon Business and B2B distribution? Well, Walmart just announced that they're getting into B2B distribution. Alibaba's trying to, but I think that's going to be much tougher given the trade environment right now. Alibaba made an acquisition about a year and a half ago in the US to try and get into B2B.
Right. And didn't they make a deal with Office Depot recently?
Office Depot. Horrible deal for Office Depot. Great deal for Alibaba. And then you kind of have like Wayfair and some kind of linear e-com players in B2B somewhat, like furniture. But yeah, generally, I think the onus is really on the incumbent large B2B distributors to say, hey, a marketplace is inevitable, just like crypto is inevitable for Facebook, right? A dominant cryptocurrency sponsored by a large tech platform monopoly is inevitable. Just like it's inevitable that a B2B marketplace rises to power in a winner-take-all environment in B2B distribution. So why shouldn't I own this? And that's where we'll leave it for today. Thank you very much for joining us.
Seacrest out.